Well, good morning, everybody. If anybody out there watches this, I encourage you to share it with all your friends. They're trying to shut me up. Here we go. Trusting our cause is just and having prayed for the fortitude to brave spiritual wickedness in high places, we citizens of America make this announcement to the shareholders of United States Corporation, including the City of London, the British Crown, and the Vatican, and their operatives in the media, government, and society. A second Declaration of Independence by the 50 States of United of America. With the utmost respect and admiration for the founders of the original Declaration of Independence, the American people humbly emulate their thoughtful, measured response to certain perpetual and ascending tyranny and despotism. We too believe it is the moral obligation of those privileged with knowledge and opportunity to work on behalf of the people, that the people are served best when their benefactors choose unity over division, nationalism over globalism, sovereignty over submission, and liberty over oppression. That all human beings are innate in nature. That America was founded under God. That the God of America is just, peaceable, and tolerant. That our material rights as sovereigns come from God, and that our God-given rights may not be revoked, suspended, negated, or abridged without due process. What distinguishes the Second Declaration of Independence from its progenitor is the object from which we seek independence. Regrettably, to our great misfortune, shame, and dismay, and despite the several warnings and accorded safeguards, a cabal of foreign investors and privateers have managed to gain possession of our land, our wealth, our labor, our well-being, our future, and even our children, and even the children. Although history has become muddied with varied interpretations of cardinal events, including surreptitious adoption of a second corporate constitution and the uncertain ratification of several amendments destructive to the people, it matters only that only one or more alien groups lay claim to America and its assets. Rather than speculate on motives and weigh unprofitably the biased accounts, unverifiable information, and plenteous theories and opinions, we engage a perfect solution, wherein we exact independence from all claimants, past and present, proclaimed, identified, or veiled. As such, the usurpers named in this declaration are representative and not specific or exhaustive, regardless of supposed ancestry, precedent, instrument, or process. Although simply enumerations, transgressions, and usurpations would suffice to justify insularity, recounting significant events reveals important facts that are missing from history. These forgotten facts add insight, perspective, and clarity, illuminating our best way forward. The inevitable civil war destroyed America's economy, ripped families apart, and cast a questionable shadow on the future of a once promising nation. America was in trouble financially and needed a mass infusion of capital to get back on its feet. A cabal of nation-building venture capitalists from Europe agreed to finance America's recovery, but demanded an active role in government to ensure their investment. In 1871, mired in debt, Congress worked out a partnership in exchange for boundless financial support. The foreign investors would handle America's administrative needs. Although initially it seemed to be an innocuous concession, the consequences of allowing the nation-building venture capitalists to conduct America's business beyond the protections of the U.S. Constitution proved catastrophic. The investors quickly embedded operatives throughout the foreign-owned corporate government, and Washington, D.C. began serving the interests of America's financiers over the people. In 1871, America effectively lost its independence, and the nation-building venture capitalists became our new masters. By the early 1900s, the foreign investors that bankrolled America controlled the major newspapers and news services, enabling them to shape what is reported and how it is to be framed. They had to cover their tracks before being exposed and repudiated by the people. The nation-building venture capitalists worked to soften America's imperturbable, elevated system of government. The founders had formed a constitutional republic instead of a democracy, specifically to prevent citizens in the majority from oppressing those in the minority. By doing that what is best for their district or state. Rather than enforce the majority will, representatives serve all citizens equally, eliminating the noise, division, and violence intrinsic to democracies. Being in control of the narrative, the foreign investors ingeniously promoted the fallacy that America is a democracy, trusting that the deception would lead to unrest and chaos that would make America vulnerable, creating additional opportunities for infiltration and manipulation. In 1913, the foreign investors established the Anti-Defamation League to slander anyone who exposed them and their infiltration into American politics. In 1913, by way of the 16th Amendment, the foreign investors were granted the authority to tax the American people directly, something expressly prohibited by their original Constitution. That the people would willingly subject themselves to forced confiscation of their property, their labor, is illogical, putting the legitimacy of ratification in question. In 1913, by way of the 17th Amendment, foreign investors breached an important safeguard that protected our constitutional republic from infiltration by enemy forces. Previously, senators were statesmen appointed by the respective state legislatures as a check on the House of Representatives raiding the public treasury. Henceforth, senators would run as glorified House representatives, reducing to promising free public money and services for votes. The authenticity of ratification is unlikely because the state legislatures would not willingly surrender their authority to bridle the appetite of the people's house, nor would they accede to transfer more power to the federal government, opening yet another door for international bankers to buy the influence they need to further their grip on America. In 1913, the foreign investors gained control of our currency by pushing through Congress the Federal Reserve Act, establishing a foreign-owned central banking system, despite the dire warnings of President Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, James Garfield, and William McKinley. The Federal Reserve Act passed with the help of compromised legislators between 1:30 and 4:30 a.m. on December 22nd, when most members were away on Christmas holidays. In 1920, Congress, by way of the Independent Treasury Act, turned over the U.S. Treasury Department and its assets, gold and silver, to the Federal Reserve, the central banking system owned by the foreign investors established in 1913. In 1921, the Council on Foreign Relations was formed under cover of advancing America's interests in the world. Fact: the Council of Foreign Relations is sponsored by the City of London and serves to advance the interests of the foreign-owned Federal Reserve by directing the President, Congress, and the narrative through operatives in their news and information networks. In 1925, the owners of the Federal Reserve formed United States Corporation. Just 5 of 100 shares issued were identified, with the balance of the shareholders of U.S. Corp remaining anonymous. Yet the money trail leads to the City of London, the British Crown, and the Vatican. The tax dollars we send to the Internal Revenue Service go to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which are under their control. The official formation of U.S. Corp set the stage for the transformation of America from a constitutional republic of the people to a corporation owned by foreign interests and their families. Over the next few years, the individual states were registered as corporations as well, making them franchises of U.S. Corporation. Representatives and senators neither represent nor work for the American people. Rather, they are managers of U.S. Corp, and as such, they are obligated first to serve its best interests. The President is not just the President of America, he is the Chief Executive Officer of U.S. Corporation. The abbreviated term United States was purposely used to represent both American and U.S. corporation to blur the distinction between them. Similarly, the original U.S. Constitution was quietly supplanted by an impostor corporate constitution that bears a similar name and appearance again, to confuse and deceive the American people. Specifically, the Constitution for the United States of America was replaced by the Constitution of the United States, with the latter becoming the supreme law of America. The latter corporate statutes becoming the supreme law of America. In 1933, the U.S. federal government declared bankruptcy, and President Roosevelt, its acting chief executive officer, signed over to U.S. Corporation America and its assets, including the people and their labor. The bankruptcy of 1933, that was arguably unnecessary, ceremonial in nature, contrived and orchestrated without the consent of the people, completed the heist and transfer of America and its assets to the same foreign interests who own United States Corporation. In the bankruptcy of 1933, U.S. Corp forced the American people to surrender their gold in trade for debt notes called dollars, fiat currency that has no seal value and that is depreciated continually through inflation to where it is just worth 4 cents January 18th, 2021. The bankruptcy of 1933 put the U.S. Corp in a state of emergency, allowing it to implement Admiral Law, made evident by the gold fringe around the American flag. When in a U.S. courtroom, you are considered at sea and not a citizen of America. In 1936, U.S. Corp began issuing Social Security numbers to turn otherwise sovereign Americans into trustees of corporate factions, making our labor taxable, which would otherwise be unconstitutional. According to U.S. Corp, you're not a live man or woman, but rather a representative of a corporation in your name. In 1945, the anonymous owners of U.S. Corp founded the United Nations under the guise of spreading peace, civility, and humanitarian assistance throughout the world. The true purpose is to condition citizens to recognize an international authority, a first step in establishing their promised New World Order, in which the U.S. Constitution is retired to make room for a universal totalitarian government. United Nations publications Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 reveal the New World Order agenda, calling for the end of nationalism, patriotism, private property, individual rights, the two-parent family, automobiles, air travel, and the right to defend ourselves from a tyrannical government. In keeping with their goal of sustainable development, they plan to reduce the population by over 90%, ridding America and the world of dissidents and useless eaters. The remaining useless servants are to live in coastal communities where they will be stacked and packed into micro apartments. United States Corp began issuing Social Security numbers to turn otherwise sovereign Americans into trustees of corporate factions, making our labor taxable, which would otherwise be unconstitutional. According to U.S. Corp, you are not a live man or woman, but rather a representative of a corporation in your name. The only thing standing in the way of their New World Order is a strong, prosperous, and secure America. To achieve their goal of world domination, America must lose its sovereignty and leadership position. And that's why the owners of U.S. Corp are quietly working to undermine our culture systems, beliefs, standards, aspirations, and morals for over 100 years, employing unrestrained methods and tactics. With trillions of dollars at their disposal every year from taxing our labor, the owners of U.S. Corp fund leftist nonprofit groups, including the Council on Foreign Relations, that work to subvert our nation and silence anyone in opposition. They integrate the officials and administrators who run the largest charities and organizations, including the AMA, the APA, the CDC, the FCC, the SEC, and the FDA. And they embed operatives in the State Department and the Department of Justice and the intelligence agencies, official and covert, including the NSA, FBI, and CIA. In trade for generous grants and endowments, the anonymous owners of United States Corporation shape the curriculum and political sentiment of the public schools, colleges, and universities, ensuring the next generation of our children harbor disdain for their country, their history, their culture, their family, and even their ethnicity. The anonymous owners of United States Corporation keep the people in the dark about the true history of America. The greatest heist and cover-up in history by controlling public education, the major publishers, the news services, the airwaves, and the social information networks. The foreign owners of United States Corporation prop up puppets throughout society and government, allowing them to make millions of dollars in trade for perpetrating their agenda of secrecy and subjugation of America. These traders include prominent politicians, news readers, pundits, authors, movie stars, and the heads of the social news and information networks, major sports teams, music and entertainment industries, and corporate conglomerates responsible for over 90% of the products designed, manufactured, advertised, purchased, financed, and consumed. Watch what you eat. By way of funding campaigns and fixing elections, the owners of U.S. Corp obligate the most influential politicians to further their agenda of breaking America socially and financially. They promote disdain for the country, dependency on government, indulgence, lawlessness, immorality, to spoil and dishearten citizens, predisposing them to trade their sovereignty for the false promises of an international unelected government sponsored by the world elite. By way of Democratic Party and operatives posing as television hosts, entertainers, journalists, pundits, and policy experts, the owners of U.S. Corporation brainwash and condition the people to accept invalid arguments and pseudoscience that call for globalism, socialism, and a godless society in which technology is our moral compass. The operatives of the foreign-owned United States Corporation are deeply rooted throughout the news and information networks, academia, government, and society. Colloquially referred to as the deep state, the shadow government, and the swamp, the operatives perform with a hive mind because they are guilty of treason, a crime punishable by death. They are desperate to hide their complicity and thus systematically target, demonize, and even suicide all those who threaten to expose their treachery and malfeasance. The operatives of the United States Corporation favor unbridled immigration because it is the most expedient way to destroy a country from within. Flooding America with illegal immigrants without allowing them time to assimilate ensures arrogance, separation, and anti-Americanism, and anger, animosity, and conflict with the people. By design, they also expect a steady dilution of the principles, ethics, and systems that made America successful. Moreover, the majority of illegal immigrants are likely to vote for Democrats who legislate according to the will of foreign owners of United States Corporation. Article 30 of the Second Declaration of Independence, in the audio version, was completely erased. However, as it reads, the best that I can make it out visually, goes kind of like this. Because the free, open, and largely unrestrained reveal the hidden heist of America and the criminal network that operates in the shadows, the owners of United States Corporation, the perpetrators of crime against America and humanity, are concerned about exposure. To ensure the people do not wake up, organize, and exact justice, they censor the information we see, ply us with psychoactive drugs, make us complacent with free money from government, distract us, and promote one meaningless sporting event after another. In conjunction with skewed statistics, deceptive polls, false facts, and the omission of decisive information, the owners of United States Corporation promote anti-Americanism and their New World Order agenda. Fake news keeps the people disoriented, misinformed, and divided over ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, and economic class. Meanwhile, their death system enslaves us. Their grip ever tightens through surveillance and fluoridation. Vaccinations and other technologies are deployed to weaken any substantiated opposition. The owners of United States Corporation are working incessantly to disarm the millions of law-abiding patriots who will stand in the way of their totalitarian, oppressive New World Order by way of orchestrated mass shootings. The owners of United States Corporation will continue to terrorize the people until we assent to comprehensive background checks. The word comprehensive is nebulous and undefined, allowing for a battery of psychological and medical testing, ever expanding until targeted individuals are deemed emotionally unstable and a danger to society, true to the predictions of every futuristic book and movie. Patriotic Americans will be disarmed by way of political profiling under the guise and screening for mental health. Through their vast indoctrination machine, the foreign owners of United States Corporation have convinced the people that America is a democracy and that democracy is the highest form of government. This is problematic because democracy is by definition mob rule. Democracies inevitably, invariably fail because the majority mob always depends on more and more public monies and services procured through excessive taxation and other socialist-like policies, resulting in economic ruin, debt, fiscal collapse, and social implosion. Because opening the door for the promised, predicted, dreadful, ever-looming New World Order is not sustainable without exposing the ills of democracy and reestablishing our devastated constitutional republic, we are compelled to make the following proclamations. Because sovereignty is not sustainable without exposing ills of democracy and reestablishing our elevated constitutional republic, we are compelled to make the following proclamations. The word democracy does not appear anywhere in America's founding documents because the framers know that democracy, in any form or disguise, is fatally flawed, leading invariably to oppressive unrest, social failure, violence, and death. All modern forms of government are elected democratically. They are differentiated only by who makes the decisions after elections are over. In a democracy, citizens in the majority make the rules, leaving those in the minority oppressed. Consequently, a democracy is always noisy, divisive, divided, ineffective, inefficient, unsteady, combustible, fiscally irresponsible, and short-lived. America was established as a constitutional republic to avoid the many ills of democracy. In a constitutional republic, those elected must not do the bidding of the citizen majority. Rather, they must do what is best for the district or state, despite the majority will. In this way, all citizens are represented equally, and no one is oppressed, making a constitutional republic quiet, steady, efficient, and preferred. Although the word democracy feels good, it is founded on mob rule, making it akin to socialism, communism, and every other tyrannical form of government. Finally, Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution resolves any doubt. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. Having exposed the greatest heist and cover-up in history, we are able to summarize America and its assets were quietly hijacked, and the cover-up has resulted in unthinkable crimes against the people and humanity. Allowing the hostile takeover to stand will lead eventually to complete and irreversible subjugation and the eradication of both justice and all that is good. This Second Declaration of Independence distinguishes the United States of America from the subversive United States Corporation. It asserts that U.S. Corp was formed illegally and that it is the foreign-owned and that its shareholders have been quietly at war with America for over 150 years. Treasonous operatives embedded within government and the fake news networks purposely divided the citizenry and facilitate conflict among the nations to hide that U.S. corporation is and always has been the only real enemy of America. This Second Declaration of Independence also repudiates with conviction United States corporations' satanically inspired plan for world governance. In addition to being of, by, and for the elite and not the people, their falsely advertised pseudo-utopian, unelected, totalitarian New World Order would supplant America's sovereignty and extinguishes forever any semblance of liberty and prosperity. Because natural inclinations predispose human beings to be short-sighted, malleable, and easily bamboozled, one might presume the American people should bear responsibility for being swindled out of their homeland, inherited from their forefathers, who procured and secured it at grave expense and much sacrifice, and for slowly but steadily trading their largely unappreciated blessings of liberty, opportunity, and prosperity for trinkets in the form of unearned comforts, frivolous indulgences, and gluttonous pleasures. However, the transfer of ownership from the American people was not conducted openly and with candor, but clandestinely through calculated design and nefarious means without body consent and unconstitutionally. It is for the latter reason the American people claim their right to rectification, that the greatest heist in history was effected outside the constraints of the U.S. Constitution, and that those who are elected to represent America's best interests transgressed their fiduciary responsibility and exceeded their authority, warrants this proclamation. That the American people are the rightful owners of their land, their labor, their well-being, their future, and our children, for our benefit and the benefit of our posterity. As with any negotiated peace after years of atrocities committed by parties at war, we seek neither vengeance nor demand justice for past transgressions. We simply adjure the return of what rightfully belongs to the people and avow firmly, emphatically, publicly, and officially that America shall forever remain a sovereign nation, free, self-directed, and not affiliated or dependent upon any version or variation of the present planned or innovated New World Order. We entreat a bloodless solution, wherein you cease all destructive activities, including false flag events, dissolve United States Corporation and all other illicit, illegal structures and custodial instruments, return our land and assets, gold and silver, redirect tax collected on our labor back to America, and have your deep state and shadow government operatives retire, withdrawing your influence in an orderly fashion so society continues to thrive in trade for you keeping your wealth, your position, and your heads. In response to questions regarding legitimacy, efficacy, and process, throwing off the shackles of national thraldom is elementary and unambiguous, as evidenced by the separation of the 13 colonies from Britain in 1776 and the Mexican people from Spain in 1828. A formal declaration hailed by authorized representatives procures independence that is immediate, full consignment, and fungible, and unencumbered by obligation, condition, or imposition. As we enter grievous territory, we reflect on the precarious road our forefathers forged when they judiciously severed the political and familial ties that bound them. Our hearts also are filled with melancholy and trepidation, yet we too are resolute in our posture and position from being confronted with no better option, despite the manifest peril, the consequence of acquiescence, or graver still, compelling us to solemnly claim our independence once again. So, in support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. The 56 signatories of the task force are to be affixed at the time of presentation to Congress, the President, and 50 legislatures, and the governors of the respected states, academia, government, and society.